I believed in clean slates. Until my past walked into Emily's living room, I had only been living in that apartment building for 3 months. 3 months, 90 days of quiet evenings, single dinners, and unpacked boxes I kept promising I'd get to tomorrow. I thought that was what healing looked like, staying busy enough not to feel, but still fragile enough to freeze when a stranger knocked on the door. That stranger was Emily. She had just moved into the unit down the hall. I still remember the sound of her voice when she asked if I had a dolly she could borrow. I didn't, but I had hands and a little time, so I helped her carry boxes instead. She was warm, the kind of woman whose presence felt like cinnamon tea soft. Familiar, quietly comforting. Her laugh had a hesitation to it, like someone who used to laugh easily, but now only did when she forgot to guard herself. Her husband was in the hospital. Emergency surgery, she said. A minor scare. He'd be home in a week or 2. She said it like a fact, but I caught the way her fingers clenched the tape gun when she said minor. We didn't talk much more that day. Just carried the weight of her life, one box at a time, into her new beginning. That evening, she slid a note under my door. Thank you. Dinner soon. I didn't answer right away. I stared at that piece of paper for 10 minutes before folding it into my journal. Not because I was unsure, but because I was scared of what connection might cost me. Again. Still, the idea of warmth, of laughter at a dinner table instead of takeout on my couch, lingered in my head longer than I'd admit. So a week later, I texted her back. Dinner sounds good. You name the night. The night she chose was rainy, the kind of weather that curls around you like a sweater. I wore a blue knit dress I hadn't touched in over a year, dabbed perfume behind my ears. It felt strange, too much effort for just a neighbor, but maybe that was the point. When I rang the bell, she opened the door with a glass of wine already in her hand and a smile that crinkled the corners of her tired eyes. Come in, you just missed Matt. He ran out to grab another bottle. I froze. Matt. The name hit a nerve in my brain, too common to matter, too loaded to ignore. But I let it go. I stepped into her home warm, cluttered, lived in already. A framed photo of a couple on the mantel, her and a man, smiling wide on a beach, arms tangled. My breath caught. The man's face was turned slightly, but something felt... No way. Make yourself comfortable. Emily called from the kitchen. Do you like white or red? I murmured red, my voice tight in my throat. I kept staring at that photo. The door clicked open behind me. I'm back, a male voice called. Light-hearted, familiar. And then I saw him, Matt. The man who ghosted me after 3 dates. The man I once kissed under a bookstore awning. The man who disappeared without a word, leaving nothing but unanswered texts and a numb week I never told anyone about. He saw me. I saw him. His face-paled eyes widening just enough for me to see the panic. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His hands fumbled with the wine bottle. I watched the glass neck tremble. He was pretending not to know me, that poker face shoddy, desperate. I hated him in that second. Emily re-emerged, holding 2 glasses. You 2 look like you've seen a ghost. She laughed nervously. Do you know each other? Matt said nothing. I did. Yes, I said, steady but soft. Went out a few times last year. Emily blinked. Really, when I turned to him, you want to answer that? Nah. His mouth twitched. It was a while ago. Years, actually. I shook my head. No, a year ago. Maybe a little less. Emily looked between us, the laughter fading from her lips like breath on glass. And I watched the air leave the room. He said we had never met. I said we had. The truth cracked like glass between us, and Emily stood barefoot in the shards. Emily did not yell. She didn't throw her wine glass or accuse me of lying. That would have been easier to face. Instead, she stood frozen, one hand still gripping the stem of the untouched Cabernet, the other twitching like it wanted to drop something but wasn't sure what. Silence filled the apartment. That awful kind of silence, too human, too tight. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the rain tapping the windows, my own breath, shallow. Then she smiled tight, uncertain. I'm sorry, I must have misheard, she said, voice soft but brittle. You said you two dated Matt, jumped in. No, she's mistaken. We met once. It wasn't. He glanced at me like I was a stranger with a knife. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing. I wanted to laugh or scream, or both. 3 dates, 1 overnight, and 1 month of slow texts, check-ins, that maddening almost something that dissolved into silence. That wasn't nothing. That was something real to me. I took a breath. My voice came out quieter than I expected. We went out 3 times. Last spring, we matched on Bumble. Your profile picture was you on a sailboat. Remember Matt flinched. Emily's face, still smiling, was cracking now, in tiny ways. The corners of her mouth trembling, the way she blinked like she was holding back something wet and sharp behind her lashes. But Matt and I, she began. We've been married for 3 years. My blood turned cold. 3 years I stared at Matt. You ghosted me last May. That was only, what? 10 months ago, he shook his head. That's not true. You're wrong. You must be confusing me with someone else. I stepped back, as if distance could protect me from the unraveling. I don't confuse the face of someone who made me feel disposable. Emily didn't say a word, just placed her wine glass on the countertop and said, barely audible, I think I need a moment. I looked at her, her shoulders hunched, her wedding ring a flash of dull gold in the kitchen light, and suddenly, I wished I had never come. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to. Please go. The walk back to my apartment felt longer than it should have. The hallway lights buzzed overhead. I could still feel the weight of Matt's stare pressing against the back of my neck. I closed my door gently, sat down on the floor, back against the frame, just sat. What had I done? I didn't plan to say anything. It wasn't like I went over there intending to destroy someone's marriage. I had accepted that Matt was gone from my life. A bitter memory, a lesson, not a wound anymore. But the moment I saw his face, my mouth moved before I could stop it. And maybe I needed to say it, because he got to disappear. He got to lie. He got to look into his wife's eyes and pretend I never existed. I didn't get that privilege. Later that night, I stared at my phone. I thought about texting her. Just one message. Something like, I'm sorry, but I told the truth. But I didn't send it, because somehow, saying anything more felt like pouring salt into something already bleeding. The next morning, the silence returned. No knock on my door, no apology, no denial, just silence. But Emily's absence was louder than any reply, and I began to wonder, had I done the right thing? Truth can be sharp, but silence cuts deeper because you never know who's holding the blade. I barely slept that night, not because I was upset, not at first. At first, I was just numb, like my body had shut itself down to conserve energy. No tears, no anger, just this dull ache in my ribs, like my own honesty had punctured something tender inside me. I kept replaying it in my mind. The way Emily's eyes didn't fully process what I was saying, the flash of fear behind Matt's grin, the way he reached for the corkscrew like it was a lifeline, and me, standing there, some ghost he tried to bury suddenly alive again, in the middle of his living room. The following morning, I told myself to act normal. I made coffee, folded laundry, watered the small plant by my window I always forgot about. But even as I stood brushing my teeth, my mind wandered. I wondered if Matt had come clean, if Emily had thrown a glass or screamed, or more likely just curled into herself and gone quiet. By noon, I still hadn't heard anything. I walked past her apartment once, maybe twice, slowed down near her door. I told myself it was coincidence, that I wasn't hoping to bump into her, but I was. God, I was. I just needed her to look at me, just once. Look me in the eyes and see that I wasn't trying to hurt her, that I was hurt too. But that glance never came. Around 3 p.m, my phone buzzed. Emily. Just that name made my stomach twist. I stared at the message longer than I should have. I don't appreciate being lied to. That was it. No hello, no question, no context, just a punch in the gut. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, deleted, typed again, until finally, I didn't lie. We matched last May. I have the messages, the dates, screenshots. She didn't respond, so I sent them. All of them. The Bumble match, the photo of him on the boat, our last conversation where I asked why he ghosted, and he never answered, the receipt of a lunch reservation from that week, a text with a timestamp from 10 months ago. I knew how it looked. Cold, collected. But inside, my hands were shaking. Because I wasn't just proving a timeline. I was proving I had existed. I didn't hear from her the rest of the day. Or the next. When I passed her in the lobby that Sunday, she didn't say a word. She didn't even look at me. Just stared past me, lips tight, eyes forward, as if I had never existed at all. And somehow, that stung more than if she had screamed. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights off, a glass of wine untouched on the table, and I let the guilt in. Not because I thought I was wrong, but because the truth had cost me something. Maybe something I never had, but something I had started to hope for. A friend. I stared out the window as the city exhaled beneath me. Horns, rain, people laughing far below. And I asked myself, would I do it again? Would I still say the words? Would I still stand there and speak? Knowing I'd be left to sit alone in the aftermath, yes. Even if it broke me. Because I refused to be invisible again. The truth didn't set me free. It locked me in a room where no one would look me in the eye, and the only sound left was my own doubt, echoing back at me. A week passed. No word from Emily. No accidental hallway encounters. No polite nods at the mailboxes. Just nothing. It was like we had both silently agreed that I no longer existed. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe she needed time. Maybe she was grieving the illusion of her marriage. Maybe she believed me but couldn't face it. Or maybe she really thought I was lying. That I was some bitter woman trying to wreck her home with a story stitched together from coincidence and old wounds. I checked Bumble again. Matt's profile was still active. Same photos, same sailboat. Same line in his bio about loving jazz and deep conversations under moonlight. I wanted to laugh or throw my phone across the room. I didn't. Instead, I took another screenshot. Then I opened a blank email, typed her name into the to field, stared, closed it again. I knew she would not answer. By Thursday, the silence had started to settle inside me like sediment, heavy, slow, and inescapable. I was no longer angry, just tired. Tired of defending something that shouldn't need defending. Tired of carrying the weight of Matt's lies on my back, like they were mine to bear. That night, I lit a candle, sat cross-legged on the couch in an old sweatshirt, and scrolled through the messages again. I should have deleted them, but some stubborn part of me couldn't, because they were proof, because they were the only thing keeping me tethered to reality, because I needed to see that I wasn't crazy. Then, at 9:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Emily. My heart caught in my throat. He says it was 4 years ago, that you're exaggerating. He says you're unstable, and that you've been messaging him for months. He said you were obsessed with him. I stared at the screen. The rage came slow this time. A low burn, a quiet betrayal. I didn't even live in this city 4 years ago. I replied, and I haven't messaged him once since he ghosted me. You've seen the screenshots. He's lying. No reply. I waited an hour, then 2. Nothing. The next morning, I dropped a small package at the concierge desk. It contained a USB drive. Inside every screenshot, every text. A time-stamped email I sent to a friend last year, telling her about a guy named Matt who disappeared without warning. And a screenshot of the Bumble app with the current timestamp. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. She could open it or not. She could believe it or not. But I was done letting someone else's lie become the truth of who I was. I did not see Emily that day, or the next. But on Sunday morning, as I walked down the stairs with a grocery bag in each hand, I saw her, standing alone near the mailboxes, pale, hair pulled back like she hadn't slept. Her eyes met mine, for the first time in 2 weeks. And then, she looked away. But just before she did, I caught something in her expression. Not anger, not fear, shame. Sometimes the cruelest thing someone can do is nothing. No words, no glance. Just leave you stranded inside your own silence. She saw me. I know she did. Her eyes flicked up for the briefest second before retreating like a wound exposed to air, as if even the act of acknowledging me would burn. And then she turned. Not hurried, not panicked, just cold, detached, like I was no one. I stood there in the stairwell, frozen, arms aching with 2 bags of groceries and a pit in my stomach so deep it made my spine feel hollow. I wanted to call out to her, say something, anything to cut through the space she had built between us. But what would I even say? I told you the truth, and I'm sorry it hurt, or worse. You're not mad at me. You're mad at the part of yourself that believed him, because I had been there too. That night, I sat in the shower with the water too hot, my skin turning red where it touched my knees. I let it wash over me, trying to burn out the feeling of being erased. I thought back to the day Matt ghosted me. No goodbye, no closure. Just gone. And here I was, again. Different context, different person, but the same outcome. Abandoned. And I hated how familiar it felt. I hated that somewhere inside. I was already starting to question myself. Was I too direct? Should I have waited? Was it even my place? I hated how even now, with every fact on my side, I still couldn't escape the voice in my head whispering, maybe you're the one who ruins things. 2 days later, the silence cracked. A knock at my door. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, heart thudding in my chest. When I opened it, no one. Just a manila envelope, no note, no handwriting. Inside was a printed screenshot. It was my Bumble conversation with Matt. But this time, it was annotated, underlined, circled, highlighted dates, and scrawled in the margin, in what I recognized as Emily's sharp, tidy print, were 3 words, I believe you. I sank to the floor. My knees gave out, not from relief, not from triumph, but from everything in me that had stayed clenched for weeks. Finally letting go, because being believed, truly believed, is not a gift. It is a weight lifted you forgot you were carrying. It is breath returning to lungs that had grown used to suffocating. Later that night, I received a message. Just 2 words. Wine tomorrow. The last time someone knocked on my door, it changed everything. This time, it felt like something was coming home. She showed up with a bottle of red and a quiet, tentative smile. No makeup, no earrings. Her hair was tied in a low knot, loose strands curling over her cheekbones. She looked tired, softer, less polished than usual, more real. I didn't know what kind you liked, she said, lifting the bottle slightly. But you said red last time. Last time. The words lingered between us like smoke. I stepped aside to let her in. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat at my kitchen table, her hands curled around the stem of her glass like she was afraid it might slip. I didn't push her. I didn't ask what happened. Eventually, she spoke. I checked everything. Her voice was low, almost embarrassed. I didn't want to. I didn't want to believe you, or him, or anything. I just wanted it all to be a mistake I could ignore. I nodded, but said nothing. She looked at me, finally, eyes red, but no tears. He said you were unstable, that you made it all up to get back at him, that he barely remembered you. Her voice cracked at that. I wanted to believe him. I stayed silent. She exhaled, but I knew, the moment I saw his face when he walked in, the way he froze. He's not a good liar. No, I said softly, but he's good at making you feel like the crazy one. She nodded slowly, then took a long sip of wine. There were others. The words dropped like stones. I felt them land in the silence between us. She didn't elaborate. She didn't have to. Her face said everything. He never hit me, she whispered, never yelled. He just lied. In small ways, ways I could almost explain, until one day I realized I didn't recognize the man I married, just the version he showed me when he needed something. Her voice was steady, but her fingers trembled around the glass. I wanted to reach across the table, to touch her hand, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry." She blinked hard, then looked at me. "No," she said, "I'm the one who's sorry. I let you walk out of my apartment thinking you did something wrong." Her words made something tighten in my chest. "You didn't. You were the only one who told me the truth." That night, we talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. Music, work, old heartbreaks. The way grief lingers in places you do not expect, like the smell of his cologne on a coat you forgot to throw away. She stayed until after midnight. When she left, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, "I thought I lost something the night you told me." She smiled, then soft, broken, but somehow stronger. "But I think I gained someone instead." And just like that, something shifted, something began. Not friendship, not yet, but trust. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. We were two women broken by the same man, but sitting across from her. I didn't see a victim. I saw someone quietly deciding to rebuild brick by emotional brick. 2 weeks passed, then 3. She didn't vanish this time. In fact, she showed up again the very next Sunday, this time with croissants and a half-laughing apology. I figured brunch beats emotional breakdowns. We sat on the floor of my living room, legs tangled in throw pillows, sipping coffee out of mismatched mugs. And for the first time, we didn't talk about Matt. We talked about Emily, about me, about who we were before the disappointment stacked so high we couldn't see our own reflections. "I used to be the funny one," she said, brushing crumbs off her lap. "I forgot that. Somewhere between hosting dinners and pretending to care about Pinot varietals. And I used to trust people," I said, almost a whisper. Our eyes met, held. We both laughed low, bitter, but real. One night, she invited me to meet her friends. "They're my girls," she said, smiling, "the ones who show up when things go to hell. You'd like them." I hesitated. It had been a long time since I'd been in a room full of other women. There's a strange vulnerability in female friendships, the way they cut past the surface. You cannot fake your way through them. Not really. But I went, because Emily asked. They were nothing like I expected. Mira was a lawyer with tattoos and a voice like a cello. Lena ran a floral shop and cursed like a sailor. And Tess, tiny wild-eyed Tess, was a crisis counselor who had once burned all her ex's clothes and felt no shame about it. They greeted me like I had always been part of the circle. No suspicion, no performance, just welcome. Emily poured wine. Tess passed a bowl of chips and said, "So, you're the one who blew up the facade." "Huh," I froze. But they all laughed. "She means it as a compliment," Lena added. "I do," Tess said, grinning. "Most people see the lie and look away. You pulled the pin. Respect." As the night wore on, the stories spilled. Stories of betrayal, of survival, of rebuilding. I listened. Then, finally, I spoke. "I thought telling the truth would cost me everything," I said, voice low. Emily looked over at me warm, calm. "It did," she said. "But it also gave you back the part of yourself he tried to erase." By midnight, my cheeks ached from laughing. We made plans for brunch the next weekend. I walked home with Emily. "I haven't seen them smile like that in months," she said. "I haven't laughed like that in years," I replied. We stopped outside my door. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, almost shyly, "You were never just the girl who told me the truth." I think I knew that even then. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered. She reached out and hugged me. Not a polite hug, a real one. Tight, steady, like something anchoring itself. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in a year. Just one sentence. This wasn't the ending I expected, but maybe it's the beginning I needed. Healing doesn't always look like closure. Sometimes, it looks like 5 women at brunch, laughing too loud, ordering mimosas like they're reclaiming joy one glass at a time. The first time we sat down together at that corner cafe, the waitress didn't know where to put us. We were loud. Not obnoxiously so, but unapologetically alive. Emily wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. Mira had already ordered bottomless drinks before we sat down, and I felt like I was walking into a chapter I didn't know I had earned. Lena shoved the menus aside. We don't look at prices here. That's rule number 1 of post-trauma brunch. Tess raised her glass. And rule number 2, no apologies for who you used to be, only toasts for who you are now. I didn't raise mine right away, because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't know who I was now, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to find out. Over avocado toast and badly poached eggs. The stories poured out like therapy wrapped in laughter. We talked about red flags we ignored, the nights we stared at phones that never lit up, the mornings we cried in the shower because we didn't want to seem too emotional in front of anyone else. And somewhere between shared trauma and shared dessert, we started to stitch each other back together. Mira said, "You know what I love most about you." I blinked. What you didn't fold, you spoke, even when it cost you. I smiled, a little bitter. It still cost me. Emily leaned in, eyes warm. Yeah, but look what it bought you. After brunch, we lingered on the sidewalk. The city buzzed around us, horns, heels, voices blending into a Sunday hum. I watched Emily hug each woman like family, and when it was just the two of us, she said something I wasn't ready for. I filed for separation. I stared at her. When this week, I met with a lawyer Mira recommended. It's not official yet, but it's happening. I didn't know what to say, so I just stepped forward and hugged her. No words, no advice, just presence. She whispered, "I wish I had listened to you the moment you spoke." I pulled back. "You listened when it mattered." She smiled through a glassy stare. "You gave me the first truth I'd heard in a long time." That's not something I forget. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, but I didn't feel lonely. I looked around at the same walls, same couch, same flickering candle. But something inside had shifted. This place no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like mine. Not a shelter from heartbreak, but a foundation for what came after. I picked up my phone and opened a blank message. Typed brunch again next Sunday. Within seconds, the replies came flooding in. "Absolutely. You better not cancel. It's tradition now." I smiled, not because I had found a new tribe, but because, for once, I wasn't just part of someone else's story. I was finally writing my own.